Today on Curve Ahead, I'm joined by Vernon, the CEO of Voxel, a fast growing AI company using computer vision to make industry workplaces safer and smarter. Vernon brings a unique blend of tech experience and personal passion to the role, shaped by his background in product, customer success, and growing up around hardworking industrial communities. In this episode, we explore how Voxel is reducing workplace injury and OSHA fines using real-time AI-driven monitoring, and why Vernon believes great software is only as good as the value it delivers to the people on the ground. If you want to learn how to scale a mission-driven AI startup while keeping customer success and safety at the center, this is the episode to listen to. Let's dive in. On today's episode of Curve Ahead, I am joined by Vernon, the CEO of Voxel. Vernon, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Vernon O'Donnell. I'm the CEO of Voxel, which is a computer vision AI company focused on environmental health and safety. Been with the company for about a year. I live in Chicago, 4 kids. The company's based in San Francisco, so spend a lot of time on the West Coast as well.
So can you tell me a little bit about your background and how that led you to now be running Voxel?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I came to Voxel because the board was looking to bring in a CEO who understood how to scale up a software company. They'd had a really successful outcome from a tech building standpoint and great product adoption, but we're struggling a little bit more on go-to-market execution, product strategy and sequencing and the like. My background was a pretty natural fit, almost to the point of being shockingly a good fit for them. So Voxel being a computer vision company, I actually have a background in computer vision from much earlier in my career. I worked at a sports technology company called Stats Perform. It was a company that was doing real-time data, providing the data backbone for, if you ask Siri a sports question or Google search. But at the same time, we were doing computer vision for athlete and player performance in the NBA and a variety of professional soccer leagues around the world. So I'd kind of been touching applied AI and nascent computer vision from a human performance perspective as far back as 2015. From there, I actually moved to the chief product officer job at a company called Project 44, which was a hyper-growth supply chain visibility company. Joined there very early stage, and so was able to really figure out the supply chain ecosystem, which then, if you think about what Voxel's doing in computer vision and AI focused on health and safety, we're very focused in industrial environments. And so those are heavily made up of nodes in the supply chain. And one of the biggest problems from an environmental health and safety perspective is ergonomics related and human performance related. And so combination of some of the body posing and human performance experience I have in the background, the supply chain experience I have as well. And then the last thing, and I never really intended to come back to a Series A company, but one of the other big draws is I grew up in Indiana. I grew up in Indianapolis, so I'm the city cousin. But a lot of my family on both my mom and dad's side grew up in much more rural areas outside of South Bend, Indiana, outside of Davenport, Iowa. And they worked very physical jobs, in agriculture as well as in manufacturing. And so this is something that's near and dear from a personal experience and family experience perspective. And I know just how underserved those environments are from a technology standpoint. So this is a natural fit across career, personal alignment, and what the business needed as well.
It's always it's great to see or have people realize that there's they kind of fall into what seems like the perfect job for them at the moment, like how their background leads up to where they are. That's why I always love to dig into that, because there's a lot of people who, they find themselves now as a CEO, but they were a product person. So they worked on product for the longest time, and now they know how to leverage that for go-to-market strategy, this, that, and the other thing. And it's kind of interesting to kind of see how people's building blocks lead them to where they are in operating a business.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, I had the fortunate experience of at Stats, I was the SVP of Ops, and then I was the Chief Customer Officer. And then at Project 44, I was the Chief Customer Officer initially, but pretty quickly moved into Chief Product Officer. So I've done customer side, ops side, delivery side, product side. And so I've gotten to wear a lot of hats. And that's been, I think, transitioning to the CEO role, probably one of the biggest advantages. And I think you're right. Look, I think most CEOs are not lacking in ego and ambition. You don't end up in the job otherwise. And 5 years ago, I would have told you I was ready, but I wasn't. And a lot of that came by going through the natural progression of learning different jobs. And I feel much more equipped to be successful as a CEO today than I would have 5 years ago for sure.
Aside from being CEO, what of those roles have been the most challenging? Ops or customer or product? And I'm sure that they all had their unique challenges, but like underlying, like which one was the hardest to operate in?
Yeah, I think product is the pretty clear answer on this. So, background even before software, I worked in kind of more traditional industries, and so ops. Don't get me wrong, it's hard. It's hard work. You put the hours in. You've got to grind. I put a lot of onus on people who have kind of a grinder mentality and like to work, but you can solution through that. Product, you're making big philosophical decisions based off of a lot of competing data points. And also at the same time, you have to execute. So the days of 20 years ago, 15 years ago, product leaders was like vision and pie in the sky and storytelling. And then the engineers had to go figure out how to build it and execute it. And I think today that's been collapsed where it's how do you set the division? How do you set the direction? How do you then execute against that? And then how are you continuously making trade-off decisions in real time between the sales team having a bird in the hand from a deal they want to get signed, but it's disruptive to the roadmap versus a long-term strategic unlock that's going to drive a lot more ARR. And I would say there's no perfect answer. Some people skew too much long-term. Some people skew too much short-term. And a lot of being ahead of product is that art and science balance of gut instinct and analytical research.
Yeah, I worked under a very talented younger CTO, and we did a lot of those trade-offs when it came to product delivery. When sales came, hey, we need to at least do some sort of wireframe for this potential sale that we have.
Yeah.
So we ended up selling quickly, but half or about 25% of each month's budget, like from our dev perspective, was done just on bug fixes. So I think that we were building a little bit too quickly and not necessarily thinking long term on how to integrate into the platform.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? You got to find the balance, as I mentioned earlier. But we had the fortunate scenario here at Voxel. We've got some pretty major logos. We've got 4 of the Fortune 50 global companies or customers, which is thrilling. And the nice thing is they're leaned into helping us think through like roadmap sequencing. And so then we can kind of play both sides. We're not having to disrupt the roadmap to go close a deal. We've already won them on the strength of our existing product. They're already live. They've already been delivered value. They've already upsold. And at the same time, there's more opportunity for us to get more share of wallet from them and solve a problem that's repeatable across our customers. And so I'm a big believer of once you've locked in a major logo that believes in what you're doing, use that as the way to kind of pressure test. How do you find that balance between moving too fast and being too much of a thrash versus being resistant to market feedback versus in the sales process? Because the sales process is, look, we've all done it, and I'm not critiquing this. The amount of deals that are like, oh, this is a sure thing. If we just say yes to this specific feature, it never comes to fruition. But guess what? You've already thrashed the engineers, so you've lost credibility on both sides. It's better with customers than prospects for sure.
How would you suggest a young entrepreneur to kind of go about getting that feedback from early customers to be able to lean into enhancing their product or offering?
Yeah, so a really wise mentor of mine a long time ago in my software career said something to me. He's like, there are only 2 rules for building great software. Rule number 1 is the customer is always right. Rule number 2 is refer back to rule number 1. There's only one rule, right? And I think sometimes people take that as literal. Like you're not literally just taking translations from the customers into your roadmap, but the concept is there's only one truth, right? Is your product delivering value? Are people buying and using that product? And so I think young entrepreneurs sometimes, and I mentor a few of them for sure, they get very focused on their big idea and their vision, and they get a little navel gazy. And they don't do enough true market validation and true customer listening and synthesizing what people are telling them. And then you marry those 2 things up. Like have a strong perspective, have conviction, have a vision, but understand that at the end of the day, in very few, if not only exceptional cases, are you going to be able to tell the market what they want. You're going to have to understand what the market is and synthesize those 2 things together. So often frequent interactions with customers, with users, trying to synthesize what problems they are into what you're building is really, really key. But don't lose the conviction of kind of the initial idea.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. Because as a young entrepreneur, right, you have to be focused on what it is that you're building. It can't be steamrolled by all these feature requests from some outside influence that drives you off of your mission. I was having a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a CEO, and I think he had closed his seed round, maybe Series A. This was his second organization that he's helped build, formal Googler, but he was always. We had a conversation about introspection and how being a CEO or a leader of an organization, there are moments that are very introspective, thinking about what it is that you're doing. Am I doing it right? Am I going about it the right way? Am I making the right decisions? And he says that doesn't matter how big your organization is, that doesn't really go away, but just making sure that you're evaluating your mission on a regular basis. Am I driving towards my mission? And is that still that North Star for us?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually, I think that's really well said. And by the way, the introspection point is great. Sometimes I find myself now almost too often, like I'm having a whole dialogue and conversation in my head at all times. And my wife will frequently tell me, she's like, "Hey, check in." Like I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm thinking about this part of the fundraiser. There's always something, but I do agree with the core concept for sure. I think it's a really good point. But on that mission front, I think that's a great example of what I meant by conviction. You have to have conviction as to what you're building, and you have to have a mission as to where you're going and what your vision is, right? And I think that what we do at Voxel and the vision we have is really, really near and dear to me, and I think very compelling and straightforward. But that doesn't literally mean here's the exact set of product value. And I think that's where people can get confused is never losing sight to orientation to mission and vision is not a dogmatic approach to every single thing you're building. And that's where that customer and market feedback is so important to help shape how do you manifest your vision? How do you do it in a way where the customer's also going to derive value from it and buy more of it and use more of it?
Yeah, because I mean, as a business, you're always there to serve the customer and you should be listening to their feedback. If you're not getting new customers come through the door, there may be something wrong with your offer or your go-to-market strategy, and you need to analyze that feedback that you're getting from the market.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of times it's not even tech. Like you'll find that so often, and there's so many great stories about this of companies that have pivoted, and we even have one ourselves where the initial conceit for the company was more focused on gym environments and athletic environments and kind of focus in that space. But same sort of concept around human performance, body pose technology, understanding ergonomics issues, but really about optimizing your workout. But it became pretty clear that the real problem to be solved was around how do you actually make workplaces safer and healthier because of the significant amount of wear and tear injuries, musculoskeletal injuries. And so the company pivoted. And I think that's one where the core concepts were the same, the tech was the same, but the pivot was pretty compelling and clear as to where things were going.
So let's talk about that. Let's kind of back up, talk about Voxel from like a 15,000 foot perspective. What is it that you're doing? Who is it that you're serving? And what is that big problem that you find yourself solving?
Yeah, so I think that at the core of what we're doing is we have an appetite to make the world's workplaces safer, right? Like that is the vision of the company. One of the founders grew up in Southwest Michigan. His father worked at a manufacturing site there and would tell him stories at dinner about all the workplace injuries and people losing limbs and significant things. And so it was really imprinted on his brain that there's a pretty significant challenge facing these sorts of industrial environments. You combine that with the desire to reindustrialize the U.S. economy. And then the third piece of, I think, technology is very focused on tech for tech's sake, like using AI to help developer tools and not enough application into the actual legacy industries that built kind of our economy at scale. So you combine all those things together, and our vision is how do we use AI for good in a way that makes workplaces safer, right? It's an underserved market with a significant problem, and it's ripe for opportunity and disruption. In terms of where we're focused customer-wise, it's really any major node in the supply chain, manufacturing facilities included, but distribution centers, warehousing locations, even ports and terminals, both airports and seaports, all those places where folks are moving goods, right? That inherently creates risk. There's risk from a forklift perspective. There's risk from a lifting perspective. There's risk from a lockout tagout perspective. And the great thing about that is those problems are consistent. And so that means that computer vision is a great way to tackle those because you can take the learnings from one warehouse and make a product more effective and safer for other warehouses in turn. So that's kind of what we do and who we are. And I think it's a broad answer, but it's true. We're in a variety of different end segments: retail, cold storage, CPG, manufacturing, a lot of tier one auto suppliers. These problems are ubiquitous, and they're common across all these various ecosystems and environments.
Are you focused solely on organizations here in the States, or are you a global organization?
Yeah, so great question. Initially started, and when I came in, I wanted to keep us focused. And so we were very much North America. We have some sites in Canada, we have some sites in Mexico, but let's stay in our local supply chain. There's a significant enough market here. We know the insurance space well. That said, as we started to land more enterprise customers and global customers, they started to pull us abroad because the results were really strong. The safety records improved, incidents decreased, workers were going home safer. And at the same time, they wanted to start to see consistent operations, right? So we have multiple customers where they use our product as part of new hire onboarding and new hire training. So now we're in Malaysia, Vietnam, Ecuador, Brazil, and we're going live with a bunch of sites in Europe later this year. So we're rapidly becoming a global organization, even though it wasn't the intentional strategy. It just the happenstance of, per our earlier discussion, listening to customers and hearing what their problems were and saying that we may need to go do this faster than initially planned.
Safety metrics a key ROI for you guys? Here's kind of your business proposition. Here are the increase in safety metrics that we deliver, and here's based off of that the ROI you get off the service.
Yeah, there's kind of three core immediate metrics. So one, reduction of claims, right? So just purely reducing workman's comp claims, and there's a hard ROI from a dollars and cents perspective there. And the great thing is today that's all lagging and reactive. Right. You don't know about an injury until a claim has been filed. We've moved that into a proactive way. So not only are we kind of helping to stop the problem, we're delivering money back to the bottom line of the company as well. And again, sending workers home safer, which is why it's such a great kind of combination of values. Two, OSHA. So anytime you have a recordable incident or a problem, OSHA will come inspect the facility, generally unannounced, and that can lead to significant fines. And those fines are entirely preventable most times. Blocked emergency exit, blocked eye wash, improperly clean spill. And so our ability to proactively see those problems, send notifications to our customers, and enable them to be, one, healthier, safer environment, but two, at the same time, when OSHA's coming, they're not kind of using money that I think is just loss, right? It's just waste, spending money on fines. And then the third is around lost days. We're still fighting such a workplace shortage and labor shortage. The ability to keep workers healthier, trained workers healthier, safer in the facility is huge. And so we do work with our customers to track lost days. Now, of course, we have a lot more granular metrics, like are your incidents of no stops on your forklifts decreasing? Are you seeing an improvement in ergonomics on your load unload station? We absolutely are tracking all of those things at very kind of atomic levels. But those three big things around reduction of claims, reduction of OSHA fines, and reduction of lost days, that's how a customer determines if there's value.
I mean, it makes sense, right? I would agree. It's an industry that I think is dramatically underserved from a technology perspective when it comes to health and safety. And I think it's interesting that you guys have worked to incorporate AI to help deliver it. I mean, with the rapid evolution of technology, AI, are you seeing more people enter into this space, or do you feel relatively comfortable with who you are, how you're established in the market already?
The answer is a little of both. I'm never comfortable every day with a deep sense of paranoia and dread. Maybe not the healthiest, but I think it helps me be successful in business for sure. But I did a couple of things on that. One, we are seeing customers and buyers start to adopt more AI more readily than what they were even 6 months ago. We're seeing just a market shift in that front. Two, we took a pretty novel approach to how we built our models and the proprietary way we approached it. We don't use any open source models. It's all homegrown. Every single part of it is unique to us. I won't get into some of our technical moat here, but we've done some things that have really stood us apart from the competition. But then three, longer term, as computer vision becomes more accessible, I always remind folks, particularly for an enterprise buyer, it's not just about seeing the problem, it's what do you do with it? And so I think a lot of startups are out there saying, hey, look at this neat computer vision tool. You can identify every time someone's wearing a red shirt or every time the fire. That's not the point. The point isn't identification. The point is, how do you now institute a plan? And so our product also has recommendations built in It's got collaboration workflows built in. It's also got probability. We're going to be launching later this year of like how do you think about risk in a probabilistic and predictive fashion. And so even as people start to do more and more AI and computer vision tools, they won't have any of that sort of like really enterprise grade software experience built on top. I view our competition as more, how do we start to go and tackle the entrenched players and other adjacent spaces and really build out a product that's going to be the future of industrial work and industrial safety.
What do you think the biggest challenge your organization faces in the next year, and what steps are you guys taking to overcome it?
We are now finally at that inflection point that's exciting and terrifying, where our biggest problem is scale. So we're past product market fit. We've gotten that. We've gotten to, I think, a sufficient number of revenue and customers and upsells that I feel really good about that. And our churn rate's low and our expansion rate's high. And as I mentioned, we've closed quite a few Fortune 5s in the last few months. And so we're starting to see some significant traction there. That's beautiful, but the upshot of that is these companies have hundreds of sites, right? And so our ability to deploy our product across hundreds of sites in a really rapid fashion, in a low friction way, that's going to be the way what sets us apart. I tell the team, we always kind of in the sales motion, we're the fastest to implement amongst our peer customers and we have the best time to live. And that's great. But unless it's near instantaneous, we're not going to be where we need to be to go deploy in 140 distribution centers in parallel, right? And so that to me is the big question: scale, technical scale, operational scale, people scale. That's really all I wake up and focus on and obsess about every day, and being really intentional on the product roadmap that's aligned to that. So we're not just building new features, we're actually thinking about tooling from a reliability, scalability, standardization perspective. And then people from a hiring standpoint, like how do we hire the right folks that fill the right roles to make sure that the customer service and delivery doesn't degrade? Because right now we have great service, but that's easy when you have 3 customer success managers. That's a heck of a lot harder when you have 20. Right. And so how do we make sure that we nail those two things in parallel with each other to really scale this business?
Yeah, I mean, kind of pulling on my own personal experience, I think that that's one of the areas that typically can fall down quickly in an organization that rapidly expands. That and the kind of the culture and tribal knowledge behind the individuals who historically have operated in those spaces, especially if there's churn or any sort of issues with that within your organization. I'm not saying that there are, but definitely one of those things that get lost is just how do you continue to foster that high quality touch point as you continue to expand this team who has direct interaction with your customer base?
Yeah. By the way, I think we have great retention, but we still do churn customers. Every company does, right? And so understanding why and how you churn is key. Being very honest and forthright with one another. I'm also a big believer of we're not going to blame. There's one person accountable for churn at this company, and it's me. And I think the worst CEO trait is a CEO that's trying to blame their head of customer success or their head of product for churn. At the end of the day, the buck stops with me. I'm allocating where the money goes. I'm making those decisions. Every single churn is something that I need to live with and really embrace. But there's another thing. There's this big trend in software for a long time of how do you scale efficiently, and how do you have self-serve and low-touch models and less hiring of customer success because we want to get our gross margin higher. I think that is such a flawed mindset, and I think it's putting the cart before the horse. At the end of the day, me having a 75% or 80% gross margin versus an 85% gross margin at this stage is absolutely not worth losing any single customer logo for. Erring on the side of investing in customer success, erring on the side of like, where you're going to be intentional and selective, and we're going to pay up for great CSMs. We're going to reward great CSMs, but not just the CSMs. I want my product team talking to customers. We put our engineers in front of customers. We actually pay for our engineering team to go do site visits every year. They actually walk the floor to customer site to like see and touch and feel how the product has interaction. That is to me the best use of capital possible, and not trying to squeeze an extra 2% of efficiency out in a way too early fashion to impress some VC who's trying to run us through the model, who doesn't understand how to operate a business. Like, customer success is the key of a great company. And I don't mean that from the literal job, but like, goes back to the earlier topic. If you believe it, you're not going to starve it. You're going to invest in it. And I think that's the thing that really I'm passionate about. And it's probably coming across in my, as I'm talking here, I'm very passionate about that topic because I see so many companies where it's like, they're starving delivery. It's like, that's not the way. That's a failure pattern.
It's funny that this, depending on what leader you talk to, they can be very passionate about this. And their thoughts on it can be very, very different. I was having a conversation with someone a couple of months ago where his entire product was supposed to be self-serve. So I asked him the question, if you actually have a customer who reaches out to you through like a support portal, do you consider that as a failure? And he said, yes. So it's interesting, right? I think that there are certain businesses that need to be higher touch than others that can be done a little bit more self-serve. But I do think regardless of what business you're in, there has to be a human element to it. There has to be person-to-person interaction beyond just the sales cycle.
I agree. I think self-serve is maybe somewhat of it's a broad term, right? So do I want our product to be self-serve and that the customer can log in every day, understand what's going on, and take action from it? 100% yes. But do I want my customer to benefit from the best practices from my other customers? Absolutely. That doesn't happen if you're 100% self-serve, how does a customer benefit from what's happening in a different distribution center? They don't, right? That's how the CSM creates that connective tissue, because you can't share that data, right? It's got to be federated, protected data. Everybody's concerned about their IP. Everybody's concerned about how their data residency. So you can't just be like, here are 50 best practices from other customers in the product. You have to have that translation layer. And to your point earlier about institutional knowledge. So totally understand the idea from a product experience standpoint, but I still think it undermines kind of the broader point of what is an enterprise solution. And that's another thing too, is who your users are. For us, our users, it goes back to the earlier point of underserved folks. These are shift supervisors. These are ops managers. These are people who come to work and their primary job in a given day is throughput, send their team home safe. It's a physical job. They're getting tens of thousands of steps. They don't have time to spend all day, every day in a technology product, right? It's people have this like, a lot of folks are like, oh, we're their first screen. We want to be their only screen. We're single screen. We're single pane of glass. You're never going to be single pane of glass in a warehouse. And if you think you are, you're deluding yourself. So the key thing is, how do you facilitate them to do their job best? And that to me is where like a great customer experience is the 360 of product experience, product flow, customer experience, best practice sharing, and understanding what they're actually trying to do and define it through what matters to them versus defining through what matters to us as a software company.
I love that. I think that completely makes sense, that you aren't trying to limit the end user's experience through limiting what it is that they see. You're trying to limit the amount of time it takes them to be able to achieve what they need to achieve on any given day.
That's right. And if their fastest way to do that is to look in the product and call one of my team to ask a quick question, get a 2-minute answer, and then go execute, by all means, we're going to enable that, right? Like if it's the opposite, we're going to enable that one too. That's where it's like, I don't like dogmatic approaches that are like hard black and white rules. My only dogmatic approach is, does my customer derive value from this? Are people going home safer from this? If they are, we're winning, right? That's the winning mechanism.
So Vernon, you've been great. So at the end of each one of my podcast episodes, I give all of my guests 90 seconds to plug anything that they're passionate about. So for you, that could be Voxel, that could be anything. So without further ado, the next 90 seconds are yours.
Yeah, so I'll plug Voxel first, in that I think what we're doing is a really important approach to solving a problem that's, again, common, right? How do we send the vast majority of American workers who work in industrial environments home in a way that's safer? So when they're in their 50s and 60s, their knees and backs aren't shot, but also safer in the fact that they're avoiding significant catastrophic sorts of injuries in the short term. And at the same time, equipping our customers to derive value from a bottom line perspective. So using AI for good for that outcome is really important. And I kind of use that to springboard to another topic I'm passionate about, which is using AI for good. I think people have lost sight of like what this is, and they're just kind of providing AI tools for the sake of providing AI tools. And as we see human behavior takes you into bad spots, I think we all, as companies building this, need to take ownership over what outcomes are we generating, and are we being responsible, and are we being thoughtful, and are we being considerate as to how these really powerful tools can be deployed in a way that's ultimately good for customers and for society broadly. And so that's the thing I'm really passionate about is the social impact of the rapid advancement of technology, and being thoughtful about that, and not for the sake of making an extra buck.
Vernon, thanks again.
Yeah. Awesome, Brian. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks. Have a great day.